After being with Oliver for 7 years, he finally said he wants to marry me. On the day of the proposal, his first love came back. I heard him say, "Lily, that's the dog I raised at home, you know? Just playing around when I have nothing to do. Killing time. You have no idea how obedient she is. She does whatever I ask her to do." Break up? Her family relies on me for support. How could she say we should break up? I quietly packed my things, preparing to leave. No one noticed my changes until I told everyone I was going to marry someone else. At that moment, I was standing at the entrance of the private room when Oliver said those words. Every word clearly reached my ears. His good friend laughed and asked, "Is being obedient really that bad?" Being obedient can actually be quite fun. After saying that, he sparked a wave of laughter. Oliver let out a light scoff, his tone filled with disdain. After playing for a while, it always gets boring. Besides, her background is just that of a maid's daughter. It's fine to play around, but how could he really marry her? I clenched my fist tightly, holding a wedding ring smeared with cream cake in my palm. Just now, I waited for Oliver in the restaurant for a full 5 hours because today is the day he promised to propose to me. But not only did he not come, he made me the laughingstock of everyone, even belittling me in front of so many people. I heard a voice nearby. It was Oliver's first love, mentioning that today is the day you and Oliver are getting engaged. Sophia was dressed in designer clothes, looking elegant and noble. When she looked down at me, there was a hint of arrogance in her gaze. When I arrived at this club, she was there to greet me and brought me to the door of the private room. Then, she deliberately let me overhear her conversation with others, saying, "Sorry, I just got back to the country today, and Oliver picked me up from the airport, forgetting about your engagement ceremony with him." Sophia pretended to care and asked, "You aren't mad at him, are you?" Then she answered herself, "I think you wouldn't be. After all, you've always followed Oliver since you were little, and you willingly do whatever he asks. Oliver often praises you in front of us, saying you're a particularly obedient good friend. Even if you don't marry him, you'll still obediently stay by his side, seeking his attention and care every day," Sophia said, her face showing clear disdain and contempt. "Lily, do you really have no self-respect at all? Staying by a man's side like this really seems quite undignified." Her words were somewhat harsh and hard to accept, and I found myself unable to retort. My mother worked as a maid for the Oliver family. A few years ago, when my father fell ill, the Olivers kindly helped him find a hospital and even paid for the expenses. To repay this kindness, my mother asked me to be Oliver's assistant, responsible for taking care of his daily life and providing him with some emotional support. Later, my father's health deteriorated, and he was almost constantly hospitalized and on medication, relying entirely on the Oliver family for care. I had no choice but to stay by Oliver's side all the time. Then one time, we got drunk, and Oliver confessed to me that he had liked me for a long time and wanted to date me. In a moment of impulse, I agreed. From that moment on, we embarked on a complicated relationship that lasted 7 years. Do you know why Oliver confessed to you 7 years ago? Sophia's eyes flashed with malice. Because I rejected him and was with someone else. He couldn't take it and turned to you. I suddenly understood, feeling a wave of repression in my heart. So that's how it is. Lily, if I were you, I would have packed my things and left Oliver's house long ago. If you stay there any longer, you'll really lose face. After saying that, Sophia pushed open the door to the private room and walked in. When Oliver saw me, his smile instantly vanished, and he coldly said, "What are you doing here? Did I ask you to come? What a buzzkill. Just leave." I stood at the door and gave him a deep look. I turned around and left immediately. To be honest, even if Sophia hadn't mentioned it, I wanted to leave. Once I left the private room, I sent a message to Grandma Smith, agreeing to the marriage. After returning to the villa, I started packing my things, preparing to move out as soon as possible. In the early morning, Oliver had drunk a bit too much. His assistant helped him back and laid him on the sofa. At that time, I was busy tidying up the small study, and the assistant told me Oliver needed some hangover soup before leaving with peace of mind. Over the past few years living with Oliver, I have almost taken care of his daily life like a nanny. Every time he got drunk, it was always me who helped him change clothes, take a shower, and make hangover soup. But this time, I made him sleep on the sofa without even giving him a thin blanket. He was so cold he sneezed several times, but I pretended not to hear. Oliver suddenly sat up, vomited all over the place, and the unpleasant smell filled the room. I frowned and turned to go upstairs. In the morning, I was sleeping when I heard the sound of the bedroom door closing. Oliver came in, pulled back my blanket, and lay down next to me, eyes closed, saying, "I vomited last night, you should deal with it." His tone was very casual, as if he were commanding a servant. He didn't take a shower, and I could smell alcohol on him. I immediately got up, stood at the edge of the bed, and said to Oliver, "Let's break up." Oliver still had his eyes closed and let out a vague grunt through his nose. Breaking up is a significant matter, and I wanted to make things clear so I could meet Grandma Smith's grandson properly. So I gently pushed Oliver's shoulder and said again, "I want to break up. Do you agree?" Oliver looked very impatient, opened his eyes, and glared at me. "What are you doing so early in the morning? If you have nothing else, don't disturb me. I want to rest." I continued to press. "So, do you agree to break up?" Oliver let out a cold laugh, his eyes filled with disdain. "Did we ever even date? It's truly ridiculous, and he still talks about breaking up with me." I stared blankly at Oliver. When his gentle facade faded, I realized that this proud and domineering man was actually quite detestable. I actually spent 10 years with such a man. It's just too funny. Since Oliver said that, I didn't want to bring up the proposal anymore and simply replied with one word, "Okay." I didn't cause a scene or argue, thinking about Oliver's matters, planning to deal with them after he left. After taking a shower, I went out. I had no intention of touching the vomit in the living room. Later, while having breakfast, Grandma Smith called me, her tone filled with surprise and a hint of disbelief. "Lily, are you really willing to marry my grandson?" I responded and then joked that as long as he didn't mind that I just broke up with my boyfriend, it would be fine. Grandma Smith was very generous. "What does it matter? He's a man in his 30s who isn't married yet, 10 years older than you. As long as you don't mind him, that's all that matters." I'm already 25, which means Grandma Smith's grandson is 35. But that's not really old. I'm quite accepting of this age, so I asked, "When can we meet?" Grandma Smith patted her thigh and said, "Today, bring your ID, see you at the Civil Affairs Bureau." I was stunned. I really didn't expect it to be so soon. However, Grandma Smith felt that today was the most suitable day. She is trying to match me with her grandson because she thinks my personality and traits are a good fit for him. It sounds a bit unbelievable, but my life has already hit rock bottom, so I don't really care about that anymore. I got back to the villa quite early, before 11. Oliver was already up, but he looked unwell, smoking on the terrace. When he saw me come back, his first words were, "I asked you to clean the living room, why didn't you do it? If you can't handle such a simple task, what reason do I have to support you?" I didn't want to argue with Oliver, so I said, "Why don't you hire a maid? I won't take care of these things anymore." Oliver frowned and said, "Lily, what are you talking about? Are you giving me a hard time because of what happened yesterday?" I said, "I haven't, I just need to," but his anger interrupted me before I could finish. "Lily, don't be too headstrong. My patience with you is limited. This is just a missed appointment. I'm not saying I don't want to be with you." After he finished speaking, he looked at me with a mix of pride and expectation. I knew he was waiting for me to ask him when we would get married. In the past, I would have gone along with him, usually echoing his words. But now, I no longer want to play along with him. I clearly told him, "Oliver, I'm already married." Oliver's expression froze for a moment, and after several seconds, he revealed a disdainful smile. "Lily, you don't really think saying that will make me jealous, do you?" He stepped forward and asked, "So Sophia's return has affected you this much that you're starting to say strange things?" I was a bit angry, glaring at him. "I didn't say anything nonsensical. I really am married. I just got the certificate." Oliver laughed heartily, not believing me at all, jokingly said, "Really? Who did you marry? Show me the marriage certificate." I didn't say anything. Actually, it was only when we were getting the marriage certificate that I discovered Grandma Smith's grandson is actually Oliver's nominal uncle. The gentleman is very polite, but not very talkative. After we finished getting the certificate, he hurriedly left on a business trip, and I don't know if he is willing to publicly announce our marriage news now. Seeing that I wasn't speaking, Oliver couldn't help but chuckle coldly. "If you're going to make up a story, at least make it believable, otherwise it becomes a joke." Oliver said, "I'm hungry, go make dinner." I replied, "If you're hungry, order takeout yourself." He looked at my departing figure in disbelief and asked, Does Sophia have such a big impact on you? How dare you go against me? I really wanted to slap the marriage certificate in his face and tell him that my actions now have nothing to do with outside influence, and that I no longer care about him at all. Fortunately, I held back. Before I started packing, I took the wedding ring out of my bag and placed it on the bedside table. Then I opened the wardrobe to get the suitcase. At that moment, Oliver's voice suddenly came from the doorway. Quickly tidy up the guest room, Sophia is coming to stay with me for a few days. I actually didn't want to clean the room, but if I refused, it would inevitably lead to an argument, which I wanted to avoid, so I chose to remain silent. Oliver surprisingly wasn't angry at my reaction. Instead, he smiled and said that if I didn't want to, then forget it. He walked into the bedroom and slowly added, "Then just clear out your room for her to stay." Even though Oliver and I live together, we mostly sleep separately. Oliver said he hoped to have his own space, and I was more than willing, as taking care of him was really exhausting. Oliver stared at me, seemingly waiting for me to explode or show dissatisfaction. I disappointed him by not showing any emotions and cooperatively said, "Okay, I'll clean the room right away." This conveniently gave me a reason to move out. Oliver was very dissatisfied with my reaction and left angrily, slamming the door. I didn't care and focused on organizing my things. After all, I had lived in this villa for 4 or 5 years, and everything in the room was something I had added myself. I initially wanted to take everything related to me, but after organizing, I realized there was indeed quite a lot. So I gave up on that idea and only took the most commonly used and important items. This made the organizing process much quicker, taking less than 2 hours. I took one last look at the bookshelf, hesitated for a long time, and still felt a bit reluctant to part with these things, so I found a box to pack them up, thinking I could move them later when I have the chance. The sound of high heels came from the door. Sophia had arrived. "Sorry, Lily." Sophia was dressed elegantly, her makeup meticulously done, like a proud peacock. "I need to temporarily borrow your room." I stood on my tiptoes to grab a book from the shelf and coldly replied, "No need to apologize, you never cared about these things anyway." Sophia's expression suddenly changed. "Are you insulting me? What right do you have to insult me?" She stormed into the room, threatening me. "Do you believe that with just one word, I can have you thrown out?" I cautiously stepped back 2 paces. "What exactly do you want?" Although I felt that Sophia had bad intentions, I didn't expect her to directly push the bookshelf over, and as a result, it fell on both of us. Heavy books fell down, and I was in so much pain that my vision blurred. I probably had bruises all over. Sophia yelled beside me, saying she had a stomachache. Oliver quickly arrived, hurriedly lifting the wardrobe, his tone revealing some anxiety. "Are you okay?" He grabbed my arm and helped me stand up, his eyes filled with concern. "Lily, say something. What's wrong?" Just as I was about to speak, Sophia tightly grasped Oliver's arm and cried out in pain, "Oliver, my stomach hurts so much." I turned my head and was stunned. Bright red blood was continuously flowing from between Sophia's legs. Sophia also saw the scene, her expression changing from pain to confusion, followed by shock and then even more intense pain. We all understood what had happened. Sophia had a miscarriage. Oliver immediately pushed me away, quickly picked up Sophia, and rushed out of the villa, heading straight to the hospital. I didn't follow. I suddenly remembered that Oliver had been traveling abroad for work almost every week for the past 6 months. So, he was going to see Sophia. It's really disgusting. The books were scattered all over the floor. I didn't want them anymore. Even if I were breathing the same air as Oliver right now, I felt like throwing up. I endured the pain in my body and walked out the door with my suitcase. I found a hotel to stay temporarily, and soon after, Oliver started calling me nonstop. I don't need to answer the phone. I already know what he wants to say. I sent him a text, telling him that Sophia was hit by a bookshelf, but it was her own doing, and I had nothing to do with it. If Oliver wants to hold me accountable, then he can call the police. I will cooperate with them. After sending the text, I blocked all of Oliver's contact information. Within a few minutes, Oliver's friend messaged me, saying he was very angry and wanted me to hurry to the hospital to apologize to Sophia, as this was a big deal. If I don't go, I might get into trouble. I couldn't help but want to laugh a little. Although I wanted to ignore them, I was worried that this group would keep bothering me. After all, with Oliver's personality, he definitely wouldn't let me off easily. It would just become a constant nuisance. So, I finally agreed to go to the hospital, but I brought 2 more people with me. When I arrived at the hospital, Sophia was weakly lying in bed, her eyes flashing with hatred and smugness. I thought she must be feeling lucky to have saved the baby, which is why she looked so pleased. Oliver turned to look at me, his eyes filled with impending rage, but when he saw the person behind me, both he and Sophia were stunned. I brought the police. I've already reported the incident regarding the bookshelf. This action completely disrupted Sophia's plans. She started to stammer, first claiming she couldn't remember, then using her weakened state as an excuse to avoid answering. In the end, the matter just fizzled out, and the police left. Sophia's attitude made everything clear. She was the one who knocked over the bookshelf, and it had nothing to do with me. I looked at Oliver and calmly asked, "Can I leave now?" Oliver still frowned at me, showing no remorse, only dissatisfaction and disdain. "That's all because you said something bad about Sophia, Lily. The problem lies with you. I've really had enough. I feel like I might be sick. If this continues with Oliver, I'm afraid I'll make a mess on the hospital floor." "All right," I said. "I'm sorry, Miss Sophia. I shouldn't have said you were shameless." After saying that, I asked Oliver, "Is this okay?" "What kind of tone is that?" Oliver said to me with a hint of anger, "Lily, if you want to stay by my side, stop throwing tantrums." I interrupted him, saying, "Oliver, have you forgotten? We are already separated." "Oh, wait, you said we were never together, so there's no such thing as separation." "It doesn't matter to me anymore. I've moved out of your house. Sophia likes my room, so she will be living there from now on." Oliver's expression darkened, and he coldly said, "You moved out? Well, I want to see where you can live after leaving me." "Lily, have you forgotten? You and your mother in the nursing home are both under my care." I didn't want to tell him that I had been promoted, got a raise, and saved some money through hard work. I said, "Have you forgotten? I told you I'm married, so of course, I live with my husband. He has more money than you and is more willing to take care of me and my mom." Upon hearing this, Oliver couldn't help but sneer, thinking it sounded like a joke. "Lily, are you still lying about being married at this point? You're richer than me and treat me better? Are you crazy? Or is there something wrong with your head?" He mercilessly mocked me. "Take a good look in the mirror, Lily. Do you really think you deserve someone better than me?" Sophia, lying in her sickbed, also showed a mocking expression. "They all doubt that I can find someone better than Oliver." Oliver even laughed at me, saying if I keep spouting nonsense, I might as well send you to a mental hospital to treat your delusions. I knew it was useless to explain at that moment, so I just said I would send them invitations when I got married. After saying that, I turned around and left. Oliver called out to me anxiously several times, but I pretended not to hear. I returned to the hotel and bought some medicinal liquor to apply on my bruises. Most of the injuries were on my back, which I couldn't reach, so I just ignored them and lay on the bed, contemplating whether to contact my new husband and ask if we would have a wedding in the future. Even though I had said harsh words to Oliver, I actually felt uncertain inside. After all, I had only met my husband once, and all I knew was that his name was Ethan. At that moment, my phone vibrated. Ethan actually took the initiative to message me, asking where I was. "I'm at the hotel. What's up?" I immediately asked. "I'm here to find you." I'm shocked and confused. "Weren't you on a business trip?" After a while, Ethan finally responded, saying he was worried about me. I was taken aback and asked, "How did you know what was happening here?" After learning what had happened, Ethan didn't seem surprised. He rarely spoke, and directly asked me, "Which hotel are you at?" I thought to myself that I had some free time recently, so I told Ethan I was fine and that he shouldn't come over. I would go find him instead. I immediately bought a plane ticket and took the last flight to another city that night. By the time I arrived at my destination, it was already midnight, and Ethan came to pick me up at the airport. He was wearing a black trench coat, tall, with a cold and handsome demeanor that made him stand out in the crowd. Passengers passing by couldn't help but glance at him a few more times. I also stole a few glances, suddenly feeling an unreal sensation. I never expected to have a flash marriage with such a handsome and well-off man. He's so handsome and has such charm. Even if he has some unspoken troubles, I'm willing to accept it. Ethan smiled politely at me while holding a bouquet of sunflowers, speaking in a restrained tone. "I didn't know what flowers you liked, so I bought this." I took the vibrant bouquet and smiled, saying, "I actually really like sunflowers, thank you." "It's nothing." After that, we fell silent. After all, This was our second meeting, so it was bound to be a bit awkward. Ethan has a quiet personality, so the burden of conversation fell on me. I desperately thought of topics to discuss that wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. At first, our conversation was quite awkward, but slowly, I relaxed. Because I realized that no matter what I said, Ethan listened seriously and responded earnestly. There was no insincerity, nor any impatience. I had never experienced this feeling with other men. Curiously, I asked, "You're so outstanding, why haven't you found someone to marry?" Ethan glanced at me, then turned his gaze away, answering, "Because the person I like doesn't like me." In that moment, I thought he was referring to me, but I quickly dismissed that thought, feeling it was impossible. After all, we have hardly met before, and we have no connection. I'm not that special, so how could he possibly have a crush on me? It must be someone else. I thought for a moment and comforted him by saying that this would all pass. Ethan suddenly looked at me and asked, "What about you? Do you still like Oliver?" I immediately shook my head, then fell silent. I was thinking, do I really have genuine feelings for Oliver? When I was 16, I followed my mother into Oliver's house and became his little assistant. By the time I turned 18, I became sexually involved with Oliver, and I followed him for 7 years after that. From beginning to end, I was always the passive one. If I had the chance to choose back then, I wouldn't have followed Oliver. I answered myself in my heart. I decided not to choose Oliver. A week later, Oliver returned to the villa. The child Sophia is pregnant with should be his. Due to an accident with the bookshelf, the baby in her belly was unstable, so she stayed in the hospital for a week and finally got discharged. However, she needs to rest well, avoid moving around, and definitely not get emotionally agitated. Sophia clung to Oliver's arm, sounding helpless, wondering what Lily would think. When I go back, she definitely won't welcome me. And what about the child in my womb? She lifted her face, looking pitiful. Oliver, you will take responsibility for this child, right? Oliver didn't look at her, just gazed at the villa, saying, "You should focus on taking care of the baby. Didn't the doctor say the baby's condition isn't very optimistic?" Sophia's expression changed slightly, her voice trembling and sounding pitiful. "Oliver, what do you mean by that? Are you really planning to marry someone like Lily?" Oliver frowned and habitually said, "How could that be? Marry her? Someone from her background doesn't deserve it. She is just my maid. Don't you need someone to take care of you these days? Perfect, let her take care of you." Sophia felt very unhappy inside. Although she wanted to find a chance to get back at Lily, right now, she wanted to drive Lily away and keep her away from Oliver. Walking into the villa, it felt desolate, as if no one had lived there for a long time. He found it a bit strange, but didn't think much of it and called out, "Lily, come down and cook. Sophia needs soup to recover." But no one responded to him. Oliver felt a surge of annoyance. He let go of Sophia, hurried upstairs, and pushed open Lily's bedroom door. The room was empty. The bookshelf was knocked over, bloodstains on the floor had not been cleaned, and the wardrobe door was wide open, with Lily's frequently worn clothes missing. Oliver's face instantly turned grim. How dare this woman not be here? What audacity! He took out his phone to call Lily, but it was always unreachable. "It's really infuriating. How dare she block me?" Oliver was very angry and kicked the bedside table, hearing a crisp sound as a diamond ring fell to the floor, catching his attention. He picked up the ring, and his expression softened instantly. Putting the engagement ring in such an obvious place must be hinting at her desire for him to propose, right? Humph. Pretending to be resolute about moving away, but deep down still attached to him? He knew long ago that she couldn't bear to part with him. Oliver felt much more relaxed now and even said with a cold smile, "I just want to make you wait a few days and see if you know who the boss really is." I get along quite well with Ethan. Although he doesn't talk much, he is actually a very attentive person who notices all my little actions and emotions. After spending a few days with him, he remembered my eating habits and favorite flavors. No matter how boring my words are, he listens seriously. Even if I suddenly want to eat street food or watch a late-night movie in the middle of the night, he patiently accompanies me. We gradually became familiar, and I also became more daring to express myself. On the way to lunch, I finally couldn't help but ask the question that had been on my mind for a long time. "Ethan, is there something special that you don't want to talk about?" Ethan suddenly turned to look at me, and his usually expressionless face immediately showed many different emotions, including shock, disbelief, and a bit of anger and helplessness. I quickly added, after spending these days with you, I've increasingly realized that you are truly outstanding, so I really want to know why you can't find a partner. Ethan gritted his teeth and leaned in close, his cologne and masculine aura making me feel a bit dizzy, my face flushed and my heart racing. Whether I do or not, you'll find out later. After he said that, he tried to pull back, but I grabbed him by the collar. I'm not an inexperienced innocent girl, and Ethan and I are already married, so I don't think there's anything wrong with doing something now. So I kissed Ethan on the lips. He looked at me in surprise, his eyes filled with complex emotions, and asked in a low voice, "Do you know what you're doing?" Just as I was about to answer, the car suddenly braked hard, and the driver shouted. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a truck coming towards us. Ethan immediately shielded me with his body. Then, there was a loud crash and the sound of breaking glass. Shattered fragments fell all over Ethan, while I was completely unharmed. When the noise stopped, Ethan's back and forehead were injured, covered in blood. I was terrified and tried to stand up, but Ethan held me down. He seemed to care little about his own injuries, only concernedly asking me, "Are you okay? Is there anywhere that hurts?" At that moment, I suddenly wanted to cry. After my father passed away and my mother fell seriously ill, and her mental state became unclear, no one cared for me like that anymore. I held Ethan tightly and told him, "I'm fine, don't worry." Ethan gently supported my waist and softly said, "I'll be fine, don't be afraid, Lily." The ambulance arrived quickly, and we were both taken to the hospital. Fortunately, neither Ethan nor I had any serious issues. I didn't even have a scratch, but Ethan had several cuts from the glass and couldn't get them wet for the next few days. So he took a leave of absence to rest at a nearby vacation villa. I stayed to help take care of his daily life, but Ethan wouldn't let me do those trivial things. He said I'm his wife, not a hired maid. The only thing he asked me to do was help him wash up. After living with Ethan for a few days, he proposed to me. He said that although we were already legally married, we still needed to have a ceremony. We couldn't skip any part. So, amidst the romantic starlights and sea of flowers, he placed a $5 million diamond ring on my finger. As for the wedding, he said we could wait until I decide. I'm fine with doing it whenever I want, it's up to me. However, he hopes it can be sooner because he's eager to officially marry me. That night, I was especially happy, took a photo of the diamond ring, and shared it on my social media. Oliver saw that photo for the first time in a private room at the club. A friend saw Lily's post and asked him in surprise, "Oliver, are you really planning to marry Lily?" He actually gave her such an expensive diamond ring. Oliver thought they were talking about the one he gave her, and casually replied, "It's only a few $100,000, nothing expensive." How could it be only a few $100,000? That ring is worth at least $5 million, it's a rare pink diamond. At that moment, Oliver realized something was off. He took the person's phone and looked, instantly stunned. "What, isn't it the one you gave her, Oliver?" "Well, I heard Sophia is pregnant with your child. So if you are getting married, Sophia would be more suitable after all. She's from a prestigious family. Then the ring Lily is wearing is fake. Considering her background and financial situation, she could never afford such a ring even if she worked her whole life." That's right, she even intentionally posted this on her social media, clearly trying to provoke Oliver. After all, she has been pursuing Oliver for so many years, and now that she knows Sophia suspects her, she must be extremely anxious and trying every way to attract attention. Oliver was amused by his friends, leaning back with his legs crossed, sipping whiskey, and coldly said, "Do you want to tell her my location?" After all this commotion, she should know she was wrong. This time, he decided to give her a chance and take the initiative to make things easier for her. As long as she sincerely apologizes when she comes back, he is still willing to keep her around. Once Sophia has her baby, he could also consider letting Lily take care of his child. At that time, she would surely be very happy. After a moment, Oliver coldly asked, "Have you talked to her?" His friend quickly replied, "Yes, I told her already." Oliver shifted his position, in a good mood, already imagining how Lily would rush over. He then asked, "What did she say?" This time, his friend's expression turned serious as he stammered, "She deleted me." Oliver's expression immediately turned gloomy. What happened? At that moment, his phone rang. He quickly answered it, only to see that it was Sophia calling, and he couldn't help but feel disappointed. Recently, Sophia got pregnant and became very sensitive, always wanting this and that, and she even wanted Oliver to marry her. Oliver had indeed considered it before, but now that he had his first love, after further contact and communication, he felt that Sophia wasn't that special after all. In fact, her temperament and personality were even less to his taste than Lily's. Therefore, every time the topic of marriage came up, Oliver could only choose to avoid it and change the subject. After a few arguments, both of them began to feel like they didn't want to go home. In contrast, Lily was much more obedient. After ending the call with Sophia, Oliver said darkly, "You all take turns calling Lily and tell her to come over immediately. If she doesn't come tonight, then don't show up in front of me again in the future." His friends quickly took out their phones and started dialing. Unfortunately, none of them could get through. Lily had actually blocked all of Oliver's friends' phone numbers. Someone noticed something and directly asked, "Is Lily really deciding to break up with Oliver? That diamond ring she posted, it really isn't fake, right? Is she going to marry someone else?" As soon as he finished speaking, that person was kicked hard by Oliver and thrown out of the private room. Who else would like a woman like Lily, whom I've already grown tired of? As soon as he said that, a wave of gasps filled the private room. "Oliver, your Uncle Ethan just posted his marriage certificate and said there's a wedding banquet in a week, inviting us to celebrate." Oliver has a bad relationship with Ethan and isn't in the mood to care about his marriage, so he casually replied, "What does it matter? His bride is Lily." I'm not quite sure how Oliver found out the location of the vacation villa. The servant came to tell me that when Oliver arrived, I happened to be applying a face mask. Ethan was busy working nearby, and upon hearing this news, he immediately looked up at me. His face showed no expression, but his shoulders appeared tense. The servant asked me if I wanted to invite Oliver in. I directly asked Ethan, "You're his uncle. Do you want to see him?" Ethan countered with, "What about you?" I smiled and casually said that my relationship with Oliver was over, and there was no point in seeing him. But come to think of it, I'm now his elder, so he has to call me aunt when he sees me. Ethan gently closed the computer, stood up, and said softly, "Then I'll go see him." For some reason, I sensed a hint of unfriendly emotion from Ethan at that moment. It seemed like he wasn't going to see his nephew but to handle some business instead. But maybe I was overthinking it. Ethan took a long time to return, and I noticed there was blood on his knuckles and a hint of red in his eyes. I was a bit surprised and grabbed Ethan's hand to look. He tried to pull away, but I held him down. "You fought with Oliver? Why?" Ethan curled his fingers slightly and said, "I've never liked him." I felt a tightness in my chest and looked up at Ethan, asking, "Why?" He lowered his head and looked directly at me, every word sincere, "Because the person I've liked for a long time is you. Lily, I liked you the first time I saw you 5 years ago, but I came too late. In fact, I had already been with Oliver 7 years ago." I wanted to say something, but for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Time cannot flow backward. What has been missed is missed. But it's okay. Ethan held my hand tightly and said, "Fortunately, you are mine now. Lily, I may not say many sweet words, but I seriously tell you that I will never let you go." My heart was pounding, and my eyes were a bit moist. I didn't want to appear too excited, which would be awkward, so I hugged Ethan and buried my face in his arms. Ethan gently stroked my back and continued, "You may not believe it now, but I will spend my whole life proving that every word I say is sincere." I choked up and replied, "Okay, I will wait." The day of the wedding soon arrived. I hope the wedding is simple, without being too complicated or extravagant. After all, it's just a ceremony. Therefore, the entire wedding was planned by Ethan and the planner. I only saw the wedding venue during the rehearsal. The ground was covered with light-colored flowers, looking simple, but in reality, it was anything but ordinary, very luxurious, and costly. As Ethan led me to the venue, he kept observing my expression, worried that I wouldn't like it. However, I was actually very satisfied. Many guests came on the wedding day. Because my father was absent and my mother wasn't feeling well, Grandma Smith held my hand and walked me step by step toward the groom. Just as I was about to hold Ethan's hand, Oliver's voice suddenly rang out. He pushed past the bodyguard blocking him and strode over, his eyes red as he stared at me. "Lily, are you really going to marry him?" I stood on the stage, looking at Oliver from a higher vantage point for the first time. "I've already registered my marriage with Ethan, Oliver, so now I'm technically your elder. If you had any upbringing, you should call me aunt." Oliver gritted his teeth, his gaze fixed on me. "Stop joking around, Lily. Everyone in New York knows that the person you like is me." You marrying my uncle is just to make me angry, isn't it? I lowered my head and looked at Oliver, while the guests around were also staring at me. To them, it seemed like I had always been a joke, like a little follower beside Oliver. Now that I'm marrying Ethan, I feel embarrassed, and Ethan would feel awkward too. I asked clearly, Oliver, have I ever said that I liked you over the years? Oliver was stumped by my question. He couldn't answer. Because I never said that at all. I'll speak for Oliver. Those who flatter you are just repeating what you said yourself. I never liked you. Oliver's expression immediately darkened. I stayed by your side because your family has done us a favor. After 7 years, I feel I've repaid that favor. Now that I'm married, I hope you won't disturb me anymore. I smiled and said, I heard Sophia is pregnant. Today is my wedding day. I wish you and Sophia a happy life together. Oliver looked bad. He stared at me and said, You're lying, Lily. I don't believe you don't like me. Clearly, you do. Then he was taken away by the bodyguards. After the wedding banquet, it seemed everything returned to normal. That night, I lay on the same bed with Ethan for the first time. Honestly, I felt a bit uneasy and inferior because Oliver had spread some bad rumors about me. In reality, that wasn't the case. My relationship with Oliver wasn't deep, mainly because I had always been uncooperative. I didn't understand the reason before, but now I do. I actually don't like him at all. I have no feelings for him. Will you hate me? I'm asking Ethan. Ethan's voice sounded a bit hoarse. What's going on? I turned to look at him. It was about me and Oliver. Ethan gently stroked my face, his gaze deep, as if it could pull someone in, with no disgust, only jealousy. If only I could have stayed by your side all those years. I smiled, but inside, I felt like crying. Ethan leaned over to kiss me, his voice becoming a bit hoarse. I couldn't control myself. Darling, is it okay? I nodded. Ethan's stamina is truly amazing. It was the first time I fell asleep directly. When I woke up, it was already the afternoon of the next day. The servant told me that Oliver had come again, insisting on seeing me in the yard. I lazily lay in bed and replied that it wasn't necessary. Don't meet in the future. The next time I saw Oliver was over a year later, at the celebration for my and Ethan's child's 1-month birthday. Many guests came that day, but this time was different. No one dared to mock me, and no one made jokes at my expense. Because I am now Mrs. Ethan, Ethan's most beloved wife. I held the child, smiling warmly and gently, and everyone around said I had changed for the better. I just smiled a little. At that moment, Oliver walked into the party with Sophia. I heard that although they lived together and Sophia had a son with Oliver, they were not married. Moreover, Oliver seemed to always be out and about. Sophia argued with him several times in the club about this issue, her belly growing larger, but it was of no use. Oliver became even more reckless. Now their child is over 6 months old, and Oliver still hasn't changed at all, often staying out all night. When I saw Oliver, my expression didn't change, and I calmly greeted him in my heart because I had long since let go of all of this. Oliver looked unhappy, scoffed coldly, and then turned to leave. I didn't take it to heart and continued to entertain other guests with Ethan. After that, the next time I heard news about Oliver was 2 years later. I heard that Oliver and Sophia's child was born with some problems, had some intellectual disabilities, and at nearly 3 years old still couldn't talk, was slow to respond, and couldn't walk. Oliver was very dissatisfied with Sophia because of this and directly gave her some money to move away with the child. Sophia is alone with her troubled child and is not in a good mental state. One day, while Oliver was flirting with someone else, Sophia drove into him, resulting in Oliver being injured, with injuries to his legs. Since then, Oliver has had to use a wheelchair. After that, news about him was sporadic, and I didn't pay much attention. The last I heard about him was that he had passed away abroad. Sophia's disabled son inherited his estate, and the mother and son then went abroad, never to return.